There's a rule we should all follow as Catholics who are, well, priests and seminarians, and really anybody facing the public has a basic rule they should follow, and that is do not be weird. Don't be weird. We have had our fill of weirdness. There's a whole scandal going on right now involving a high profile Catholic commentator who allegedly was doing improper things with young women, well outside his proper state in life, and frankly involving people who were too young for him to be doing those things with anyway, allegedly. And there's a rule in life: don't be weird. That person, good name, should not be thrown in the mud with a lot of other people. He should have his due opportunity to clear his name just like anybody else, even if the person in question has said some rather heinous things about traditionalists. Weirdness is the rule of the day right now. And you would think that seminarians and priests would be well aware that they are under the most scrutiny of anybody in the church, and have been for a couple of decades now, because some men of a typically James Martin persuasion completely went onto the most unnatural depths of depravity with their inclinations, committing the McCarrick type misdeeds. Priests and seminarians should not be weird, which is why this story struck me as absolutely bizarre when this came across my feed on X yesterday. So we'll go here to The Pillar, who posted it originally. Headline from The Pillar: Yeti blood oath divides Denver seminary. A well-intended moment. It clearly went badly wrong and should never have happened. That's written by Ed Condon. The Pillar's not exactly an extreme outlet. I just got to ask, at what point, when you are a seminarian or a priest, does a blood oath sound like a well-intended moment? There are already many of you who are going to respond to this thinking the rector or the priest involved with these seminarians was essentially a stonecutter trying to bring them into their secretive dark organization. And you would be forgiven for thinking that, honestly, because we're in a time now where things are so strange in the church that these kind of stories don't even shock people that much. Now, let me know if you're actually shocked here. See, already one comment. This is probably some satanic black magic ceremony. This is demonic. You are forgiven for thinking that too, because it might be. I tend to think this reminds me more of things that fraternities do to new members, which are not good and should never be defended. And I'm quite happy that most universities, including the ones that I've worked at in my past before going full-time on YouTube, they all banned the practice of those kinds of initiation programs. Maybe the USCCB should ban this for all seminaries in North America. Here, let's just go over this article. It's worth going over. Again, written by Mr. Ed Condon, published at The Pillar. Clergy in the Archdiocese of Denver are divided over the handling of a controversial blood oath ceremony involving a vice rector and seminarians during a ski trip last year. A group of seminarians studying at Denver's St. John Vianney Theological Seminary were taken on the trip in January 2024 by then Vice Rector of the seminary, Father John Nepple, during which they were woken in the middle of the night and invited individually to swear a blood oath in a ceremony involving a dagger and a man in a Yeti costume. Somebody thought this was a good idea. During the bizarre ceremony, video of which was sent to The Pillar by multiple sources in the Archdiocese, seminarians were told to scream as if in pain before returning with a bloodied cloth wrapped around their hand and their mouths taped shut to a room where others waited for their turn to be brought in. The Archdiocese of Denver, in a statement to The Pillar, characterized the event as a farce and said that it, quote, was, however, part of a deeply imprudent and inappropriate prank, and that a full investigation had been completed. The individual responsible has since been removed from his seminary leadership role and has recommitted to his ongoing personal and spiritual formation, the Archdiocese said. The fallout of the event has divided students, faculty, and clergy in the diocese, with videos and images of the event circulating for several months. Let's just hold on right there. Images and video of this have been circulating for months online. And this is the first anybody's really hearing about this. How is that possible that some media outlet didn't pick this up before The Pillar? And I'm actually kind of glad it was The Pillar, because The Pillar is restrained almost to a fault in their coverage of controversial events in the church. They gave Francis way too much benefit of the doubt compared to any other outlet practically that was inclined to be critical of things. So how did this take this long to make the news? Remember the basic rule. Don't be weird. If everybody's got their things that send them to confession, don't involve other people with those. If you're anywhere near the public, go to confession and work on the virtues needed to squash those sinful inclinations. And when it comes to this kind of thing, if you've got this idea that, hey, I'm going to involve other people in this thing that outsiders will think is a stonecutter kind of ceremony or worse, talk to your spiritual director. They'll talk you out of this and maybe help save your ecclesiastical career, or maybe recommend that you're not appropriate for the position you have, and that you should gracefully just quietly submit a resignation for that post and go do something else that you can get your head clear, because this is on its face inappropriate. Because it might be a farce, an imprudent prank, but what does it look like to people? My own comments right now, my live chat right now, for those of you watching later, filled with people saying, oh, this looks like a satanic ritual. I'm sure I'm going to see it in the comments later after the live stream itself has ended. Father Nepple told the pillar he had, quote, acknowledged his imprudence, apologized to the archbishop and the seminarians involved, and said that while the event was intended as a prank, he took responsibility for what had happened. While some in Denver had characterized the affair as unacceptable hijinks and imprudence, others considered the ritual spiritually troubling and deeply problematic, with video footage being forwarded to the Apostolic Nunciature in Washington, and some dioceses considering whether to withdraw students from study at the Denver Seminary in the wake of the events. Further division has been caused by what some local clergy call a contradictory and confused handling of the issue by the Archdiocese. But while the Archdiocese said in its statement to the pillar that Father Nepple was removed from his position as formentor and house father immediately after the incident was uncovered, he returned to his post as vice rector. Of course he did, until the end of the 2024-2025 academic year, and remains on the seminary's academic faculty as a professor. Following an archdiocesan investigation last year, the seminary rector was also removed from his position and was replaced midway through the academic year. You know, this kind of reminds me of the stories. There's a story that I got a video coming later in the week on, but it's about a priest who did hard time for McCarrick stuff. He gets out, he gets done paying his debt to society as the Italian government saw it, and the archdiocese put him back in a position of authority in the church. This seems to be a problem. Now, I'm not saying this priest should be canceled completely, but I think it would be a good idea to have somebody like Father Ripperger have a conversation with him and really find out if there's something deeper going on, and maybe have a conversation with those seminarians. I know not everybody likes Father Ripperger. Some think that some of his takes are pretty hard pill to swallow. But these kind of things can have lasting spiritual damage on people. It would be a good idea to have a serious exorcist have a conversation with that priest and with the seminarians. They should not take this lightly. They should take this very, very seriously, because they are playing with fire when you start doing these weird blood oaths. I can't imagine the thinking that said, hey, this is totally okay. Anthony Abbott of Avoiding Babylon. This story is beyond insane. It is. It's an absolute total failure of basic prudence. Nobody should be thinking, hey, let's pantomime satanic rituals. There's just nothing about this that says this was a good idea. And then you put that person back into a position of authority, even temporarily. Maybe wait a few years until it's been demonstrated that this is all in his past and that he is back to a position where he can actually use his talents and his skills in a teaching position for the church. Forgiveness is a wonderful thing, but there often takes time to demonstrate it. Here are the details of the trip itself. In January 2024, Father Nepil took some 15 seminarians on a ski trip to a house in the mountains in the Crested Butte area, belonging to a Catholic family close to Father Nepil, according to several clergy familiar with events. In the middle of the night, the seminaries were woken and told to sit in silence in the living room before being invited individually into a trailer on the house's grounds, When they entered the trailer, the seminarians were met by Father Nepple, who can be seen in the video setting up a camera to record the occasion, along with a senior seminarian and participant on the trip and a person dressed in a Yeti costume. Each seminarian was then invited to sit at a table on which there was a dagger and what appeared to be blood and a dollar bill on a piece of paper. In one video of the ritual seen by the pillar, the seminarian is asked if he has any ideas what's going to happen, to which the seminarian responds, "No. You're about to enter into a sacred tradition," he is told. "Are you ready for it?" The seminarian is also informed that, quote, "people who come up here, and not everyone makes it, enter into the tradition. The way it works, the only way you can enter into this family is you've got to make a blood oath," he is told in the video. While it is explained that the group started with another seminarian whom they knew, who would have the intestinal fortitude to go through with the initiation. "We hope you have it too. If you enter into this family, there's no going back. The seminarian is involved." Now, it's not pretty, as you can see, the seminarian is told, seated in front of the bloody surface and knife, but if there's enough courage in there, we can get through it. At this point, the seminarian nods his assent, and Father Nepil can be seen leaning into the camera, holding the dagger as the seminarian bares his left arm and places it on the table. "Gonna hurt for a second," Father Nepil says before counting down from 3, at which point a voice says, "Stop, there is another option." The seminarian is then told that having already shown your bravery, the ritual can be completed with bear blood. As grisly bear blood is poured on his hand, the seminarian is told there's no going back, and is asked to make the most guttural scream you can possibly make to show commitment to this tradition for the benefit of the others waiting to be initiated. After he screams, the priest and the Yeti figure shake the seminarian's hand, and he is told to go out there and make sure the other guys see you with the blood, but you don't tell them what is going on. Other images seen by the pillar show seminarians seated on a sofa with their mouths taped closed. The pillar has decided not to publish a video or other images of the seminarians involved out of respect for their privacy. Several sources familiar with the events told the pillar that this was the second year in which the trip, including the blood oath exercise, took place with Father Nepil, but that the previous year's event did not lead to complaints and no footage or documentation existed. Yeah. Do you agree that an exorcist should have some conversations with everybody involved in that? Maybe go pay a visit to where they did this at and do some sort of consecration of the place. Look, that is without question diabolical. They might, even if it was done instantly, this could be just them playing with fire. Imagine somebody who doesn't believe a Ouija board or tarot cards are bad, and so they find one and start messing around with it. They don't really think they're going to go contact spirits from the great beyond or whatever. But they end up opening themselves up to the demonic. This may have been an imprudent prank and hijinks, something akin to a college fraternity's entry rituals. But it's diabolical, without question. And the fact that this has happened multiple times and the priests involved back to a position of authority, even temporarily, is a red flag. But I've heard stories out of the Archdiocese of Denver, and they're not good. The bishops there are one of the more conservative ones, and the stories coming from that archdiocese aren't good. So I'm not that surprised that that's how they handled this. Ryan Gabriel says Satanism takes that lack of seriousness and adds in sacrifice. It does, and it relies on this lack of seriousness when you start really going up to sort of the electric fence of dark arts and things, thinking, oh, this is not a big deal. And you get involved in it, and it opens yourself up. Ryan Gabriel says stop blindly trusting people who act nice. Many of these nice people are at your church plotting your destruction. I mean, at these days, it's, yeah. Philip says, not Father Ripper out in Colorado. He should visit and speak to those involved for certain. I will tell you that just from what I hear, Father Ripper's status with the diocese isn't always great. He isn't always great. So that's all I know. I don't know too many details, but it's unlikely that the diocese is going to call him and ask them to have a conversation. But maybe he can talk to the official exorcist for the diocese and have him have a conversation. This is one of these kind of stories that will be a cautionary tale, I think. In fact, it almost sounds like something out of a Hollywood movie. You know, Dan Brown kind of stuff. If you're wanting to make the church look bad, do this kind of stuff. That way, when it gets out, people will just be like, oh, see, told you. this is what the Catholic Church is. This is not what the Catholic Church is. This is, if anything, indicative of the lack of seriousness in our age when it comes to the understanding of the nature of the spiritual warfare we are engaged in at every waking moment of our lives. In a statement to the Pillar, the Archdiocese of Denver said that members of the St. John Vianney Theological Seminary community were found participating in a prank, being asked to take a blood oath and other imprudent behavior. Fortunately, the investigation uncovered that the event was a farce, that no oath had taken place, and at no time was there risk of bodily harm, the Archdiocese said. It was, however, part of a deeply imprudent and inappropriate prank. Father Nabil told the Pillar that it is understandable that people are upset by this video. At the time, this seemed like a prank on a ski trip. He stressed that none of the props used or seen in the video were real. I deeply regret my role in what took place. I can assure you I will never participate in anything like this again, he said. It is important to emphasize that the Archdiocese completed a detailed investigation and confirmed that there were no oaths taken and no one suffered any physical harm. He offered further context for the trip, the video, and the strange images it contained, saying that the idea of this prank came from the man hosting the seminarians and the seminary staff on the ski trip, whom he confirmed was the person in the Yeti costume. This Catholic man is well known in the town and is regularly asked to appear at events in this costume. He has done this specific prank many times with family, friends, and other guests who stay at his ski cabin. At no time was there any risk of physical harm, but in hindsight, and even though the host wanted to do this, it should have never happened. It was clearly imprudent to film the event, given the possibility of being misinterpreted as more than a prank. I've apologized to the Archbishop and the seminarians present on this trip for this failure of my leadership. And it goes on, making sure that it's not a hazing event, which is good, I guess, but it looks at every way like a fraternity hazing event. And there should be zero tolerance for that. Now, the priest in question has apologized vociferously. I do think he should still have a conversation with an exorcist, perhaps with his bishop present, and hopefully pray that the bishop takes this seriously. I'm curious what you think of this story. Do you think that this kind of thing happens more widespread than we think? I would say so, but not in this overt way. You hear stories out of seminaries. I've hinted at them before. Seminarians who are too conservative, who play a traditional breviary, who have too much of a devotion to the rosary for the vice rector and the rector's tastes, and who we'll call them naturally aligned inclinations. If they were going to pursue a vocation other than a vocation of the priesthood, they'd be pursuing marriage. We'll put it that way. People who are normal, who aren't weird, are often pushed out. Some make it through by just keeping their head down. I'm also reminded of Ted McCarrick, who would invite seminarians to his beach house to be the entertainment for his priest friends and allegedly some bishops. This is why you can't be weird. You can't do this stuff, even if it seems like a harmless prank. Not only are you touching on the diabolical, putting people's souls at risk, it without question causes scandal when it comes out, and it will come out. This will get more traction. Hopefully the bishop does the right thing here and makes a good decision, and the priest's contrition is 100% legitimate, and I will give him the benefit of the doubt and assume that it is, and that proper steps are taken in dioceses across the U.S. to keep these kind of trips from happening. Maybe the exorcist should also visit the man with the Yeti costume. Margaret says, prank are not the thoughts, words, and putting it into action is evil and opening the door for more. Yes, you don't play around with anything that touches on the dark arts. Helen says, I don't really know how you're able to sleep with all of this stuff. Well, I pray the little office of the Blessed Virgin Mary every single day, all the hours of it. And it's why I appreciate the prayers people offer. Marcel says, I met next seminarian at a Vatican program 20 years ago. He said the shenanigans in his dorm at night were so loud he couldn't sleep. I've heard similar things. Joe Bullock says, if don't tell anyone about this as part of the equation, then there's a problem. The advice your parents gave you when you were a small child that said if anybody said something like that to you, the first thing you do is go tell your parents. That logic applies when you are a seminarian. I shouldn't have to tell you why, but I just did. McCarrick. Okay. And now you have this story. And Annibale Bugnini, who was cast out of the Vatican in the 70s after he imposed a new mass on the church, which apparently Paul VI regretted, and all these things. And he was cast out to go be the archbishop in like Iran or something. Why? For being something worse than a stonecutter. That's in the official record. I don't know what that could be, except maybe an out-and-out Satanist. Beyond that, I couldn't tell you what's worse than that. So this has been a problem for a long time. I've done videos on this channel of Father Gabriel Amorth talking about there being a satanic sort of infiltration in the church. And he was a very serious exorcist. He was not one to make up stories. He had an unimpeachable reputation, and he said stuff like that. So please, take this stuff seriously. Pray. He says a skin cutter, stone cutter. Someone can explain it to him in the comments. I can't use the actual name for it on YouTube. Found out the hard way. Joseph says with a $5 super chat, appreciate it. Cardinal Ernest Simoni traveled to New Jersey this past Friday and Saturday to offer worldwide exorcism prayer with permission of Pope Leo and Cardinal Tobin. Okay, that's good. I mean, that's good news. You know, an exorcism is always a good thing. But for what purpose, though? That's what I'd be very curious about. Great way to determine which seminarians are on the team. Yeah. This is why you can't have these kinds of things. Shin said, did you find any more about the reported apostolic visitation of the monks of Popay, Stronsay, in Scotland a couple of years back? Those good men would never do something like this. I have not heard anything else about that. But if anybody knows details, send me an email. Address is in the description. Just put the monks whose name are on the screen right here in the subject line if you have an update. All right, folks, thanks very much for tuning in. Pray for everybody involved in this, the seminarians, the rector, the bishop who has to wrestle these weird decisions. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.